this the most useless ex-wife that I was spending my precious life with.
What is happening? Is that a private jet?
Oh my goodness! Look how she arrived! Absolutely stunning.
Look at her confidence.
She looks stunning.
Pregnant woman was humiliated at the party by her ex-husband. Minutes later, she arrived in a private jet. She walked into the party, carrying more than a baby. She carried a past her ex-husband thought he had buried. He laughed when he saw her, pointed, mocked, made sure everyone knew she was nothing without him. Pregnant, alone, uninvited. She wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't supposed to survive the humiliation. And she definitely wasn't supposed to stand quietly, absorbing every insult with tears in her eyes. He thought he had won. Thought leaving her had been the smartest decision of his life. Thought the world would always clap when he laughed at her pain. What he didn't know was that the party was about to stop breathing. Because minutes later, as the music played and the guests whispered, a private jet descended from the sky. And in that moment, the woman he humiliated was no longer the joke of the party. She was the reason everyone would regret laughing. Stay with me, because what happens next will change how this man understands power, pride, and regret forever. Welcome to Ocean of Tales. Before we begin the story, tell us in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is in your country. If emotional stories of humiliation, faith, kindness, and unexpected truth move you, subscribe to the channel and stay with us. Rain had just stopped falling over Lekki, Lagos, leaving the evening air thick and metallic, when Gloria Ndukwi stood alone at the edge of a manicured driveway that shimmered under floodlights. Luxury cars purred past her like she didn't exist. Music floated from behind towering gates. Every step closer made her pulse louder, not because she was unsure of where she stood, but because she knew exactly how unwelcome she was. The invitation in her trembling hand felt heavier than her pregnancy, glossy and expensive, as if it had been designed to cut rather than welcome. And still, she stepped forward, because turning back would mean surrendering before the fight even began. A gust of wind brushed against her lemon gown, clinging to the curve of her belly as guards at the gate scanned her from head to toe. Their pause lingered too long. Their eyes asked silent questions Lagos had perfected. Who invited you? Who do you think you are? The scent of champagne and perfume drifted toward her, mocking her with comfort she no longer had. Gloria inhaled slowly, grounding herself, because the moment she crossed that gate, her past would no longer be private. And somewhere inside that party was a man who once promised never to embarrass her, a promise she knew tonight would be broken again. Light exploded around her as she entered the compound, crystal chandeliers suspended from white canopies reflecting off-polished glass tables. Conversations softened, then stalled. She felt it instantly, the shift. Lagos society was fluent in silence. Eyes turned, paused, judged. She recognized some faces. Women who once attended her wedding, men who toasted her marriage with raised glasses. Now their smiles tightened, calculating how far her fall had been. Gloria's hand moved instinctively to her belly, a quiet shield, as whispers began to ripple outward like cracks in glass that hadn't shattered yet. Her shoes sank slightly into the lush lawn with every step, each movement deliberate, each breath measured. This party wasn't an accident. Someone wanted her here. Someone wanted this moment. The realization settled cold in her chest as laughter resumed, too quickly, too rehearsed. She felt like a character dragged on stage without a script, expected to play the role everyone had already written for her. Yet her back remained straight. Her chin lifted, because if humiliation was coming, she would not meet it kneeling. Music swelled again, louder now, but it couldn't drown the tension curling through the crowd. Gloria sensed it, the anticipation, the hunger for spectacle. In Lagos, success is worshipped, and failure is fed to the crowd. She had been gone too long, silent too long, and silence always invites assumptions. They thought they knew her story. They thought she came to beg, to cry, to remind people she still existed. None of them noticed how calm her eyes were, how controlled her breathing remained, like someone waiting for timing rather than mercy. Near the center of the lawn, a cluster of laughter erupted sharply, and Gloria's chest tightened before her eyes even found the source. She didn't need to see him to feel him. Some presences announced themselves through memory alone. The air felt heavier, charged with unfinished history and unresolved cruelty. She stopped walking, just for a second, steadying herself, because she knew the next few moments would redraw the rest of her life, whether she was ready or not. As she took another step forward, the crowd subtly parted, not to welcome her, but to make space for what they expected to happen next. Somewhere ahead, mockery waited. Somewhere ahead, her name would be reduced to a punchline. And somewhere ahead stood Obeji Ikem, the man who believed this night would confirm his victory. What Gloria didn't yet see was how close the sky itself was to intervening, and how badly everyone inside that party had misread her silence. The moment Gloria and Ndukwi stepped deeper into the party, the atmosphere shifted in a way no music could hide. Her pregnancy arrived before she did. Eyes landed on her belly first, then slowly climbed to her face, as if searching for shame written across her skin. Conversations nearby fractured mid-sentence, then restarted in whispers. Some guests leaned closer to one another, mouths half covered by glasses, pretending discretion while feeding curiosity. In a place where luxury usually commanded respect, her pregnancy became an inconvenience, a disruption to the polished illusion. She felt it immediately. This was not a room that celebrated life. It was a room that measured worth, and she already knew how they were counting. Heat from the Lagos evening mixed with the glare of floodlights, making sweat gather at the nape of Gloria's neck. Her lemon gown flowed softly, but it couldn't hide the tension running through her body. Every step drew attention. Every movement felt magnified. A few women looked away quickly, afraid sympathy might associate them with disgrace. Others stared openly, curiosity overpowering manners. Pregnancy here was not seen as strength or sacrifice. It was treated like evidence, proof that her life had gone wrong. Gloria kept her breathing steady, one slow inhale after another, reminding herself that this child was not a mistake, even if the room had already decided otherwise. Near a champagne table, laughter bubbled too loudly, forced and sharp, the kind that followed gossip like an echo. Gloria felt the weight of assumptions pressing in from all sides. They imagined hospital bills unpaid, a father absent, a woman abandoned and desperate. No one considered the nights she endured quietly, or the strength it took to keep moving when the world turned its back. Her palm rested gently on her belly, a small but deliberate gesture, grounding herself. The baby shifted slightly, a subtle reminder of purpose. In that instant, fear flickered through her chest. Not for herself, but for the child growing inside a room that showed no mercy. The scent of grilled food and expensive perfume hung heavy in the air, clashing with the knot forming in Gloria's stomach. She caught fragments of whispers as she passed, speculation dressed as concern, judgment disguised as curiosity. Some wondered aloud how far she had fallen. Others questioned why she would dare show up like this. The cruelty wasn't loud yet, but it was building, layered word by word. Gloria's steps slowed, not from weakness, but calculation. She understood this environment too well. Lagos society could smile politely while sharpening its knives. And tonight, she was the target they had been waiting to carve. A sudden burst of laughter rippled from the far side of the lawn, sharper than the rest, cutting through the background noise. Gloria's shoulders stiffened instinctively. She didn't turn yet. She didn't need to. That sound carried familiarity, arrogance shaped into amusement. Around her, guests subtly angled their bodies, creating an invisible corridor of attention. Her pregnancy became the centerpiece of an unspoken joke. She felt her throat tighten, but she refused to let tears rise. Crying would give them what they wanted. Instead, She lifted her chin slightly, allowing her silence to speak where words would only break. Cameras appeared quietly, phones raised under the excuse of capturing memories. Gloria noticed them all. In this age, humiliation traveled faster than truth. A single photo could rewrite her story forever. Her heart pounded harder now, not with panic, but with awareness. She was being documented, framed as a spectacle. The baby kicked again, stronger this time, and she pressed her hand to her belly, a promise made in silence. Whatever happened next, she would not let this child inherit shame. The room mistook her composure for defeat, never realizing restraint was the hardest strength to carry. As Gloria finally lifted her eyes toward the center of the party, she sensed the moment tightening, like a rope pulled too far. The pregnancy they judged was not the weakness they believed it to be, it was the anchor holding her steady. Somewhere ahead, the night was preparing to turn crueler, louder, more public. And somewhere within the crowd, Obeji Ikem was enjoying the sight, unaware that this very pregnancy would soon become the symbol of everything he failed to understand. Gloria took one more step forward, knowing the next wave of humiliation was about to begin, and the room was not ready for what followed. Laughter erupted near the center of the lawn, loud enough to cut through the music, and Gloria Ndukwi felt it strike before she saw its source. The sound carried confidence, ownership, and a familiarity that tightened her chest. Guests shifted instinctively, drawn toward it like gravity. When she finally turned, her eyes met Obeji Ikem's presence across the space, tailored suit, relaxed posture, power worn casually. He stood surrounded by admirers, a glass raised loosely in his hand, enjoying the attention. The night had been built for him, and in that moment, he noticed her, his smile sharpening as if the party had finally delivered its real entertainment. Obeji's reaction was immediate and deliberate. His laughter grew louder, exaggerated, spilling outward as heads turned in their direction. He gestured openly, not subtle, not restrained, inviting the crowd into his amusement. His expression held no surprise, only satisfaction. To him, Gloria's presence confirmed everything he believed, that she had fallen, that life had humbled her, that she had come seeking relevance. The way he looked at her stripped away years of shared history, reducing her to a spectacle. He didn't speak her name. He didn't need to. His body language alone told the story he wanted everyone to believe. The crowd responded exactly as he expected. Laughter followed his lead, rippling outward in uneven waves. Some guests smiled nervously, others laughed too freely, eager to align themselves with power. Obeji thrived in that response. He straightened slightly, shoulders back, enjoying the reinforcement. Every chuckle inflated his confidence. This was his stage, his audience, his proof that leaving Gloria had elevated him. He had traded struggle for status, silence for applause. And as the attention locked onto him, he missed the quiet truth forming just beyond his control. Gloria remained still, her feet rooted to the grass, as if the earth itself steadied her. She felt the heat of attention burning into her skin, the judgment thickening with every laugh. Obeji's eyes flicked briefly to her belly, and his grin widened, cruel and dismissive. That single glance carried accusation, mockery, and ownership all at once. To him, her pregnancy was evidence of failure, not resilience. He assumed he was witnessing her lowest point. He assumed wrong. But assumption had always been his weakness, even when it looked like confidence. A few guests leaned closer to Obeji, whispering into his ear, feeding his ego with reactions he had already earned. He nodded along, amused, soaking in approval. His laughter softened into a smirk now, slower, controlled, like someone savoring victory. The past, as far as he was concerned, had been settled. Gloria was a closed chapter, one he enjoyed reopening only to remind himself how far he'd risen. He didn't notice how the energy around the party began to tighten, how curiosity was slowly overtaking mockery. Gloria's breath remained measured, though her heart raced beneath her palm. She watched Obeji not with anger, but with clarity. This was the man she once trusted, once defended, once believed in. Now he stood elevated by cruelty, mistaking noise for power. The laughter that fueled him felt hollow to her, thin as glass. She could feel something shifting, not in the crowd but in timing. The night was stretching, holding its breath, and Obeji, lost in performance, failed to sense the approaching silence. As Obeji raised his glass again, basking in admiration, the music dipped slightly, then surged back, masking a sound only a few noticed at first. Gloria did. A low hum, distant but growing, vibrating faintly through the air. She didn't react, didn't look away, didn't smile. Because she knew laughter rarely survives interruption. And somewhere above the lights and laughter, something was moving closer, something that would expose how fragile Obeji's moment truly was. Phones rose subtly, screens glowing like small, judgmental eyes as the crowd leaned into the moment. Some guests adjusted their positions, angling for a better view, careful not to block Obeji Ikom's spotlight. Laughter didn't just continue, it coordinated. It became agreement without words. Gloria Ndukwi felt it settle around her like humidity, thick and suffocating. This wasn't just one man's cruelty anymore. It was communal permission. The party had decided who mattered and who didn't, and it wasn't her. In Lagos, alignment with power often mattered more than truth, and tonight, power was loud. A woman near the bar shook her head slowly, lips pursed in false pity, while another leaned in to whisper something sharp behind manicured fingers. Men smiled with detached amusement, relieved the spectacle wasn't about them. No one intervened. No one asked if Gloria was okay. Empathy would have required courage, and courage rarely survives crowds. The silence between laughs carried weight. Approval disguised as neutrality. Gloria realized then that humiliation multiplied when witnesses chose comfort over conscience. Each person who stayed quiet became part of the cruelty, whether they meant to or not. The music pulsed louder, attempting celebration, but the tension underneath grew restless. Guests shifted closer together, feeding off shared judgment, enjoying the safety of numbers. Some faces reflected discomfort, but even discomfort stayed passive. No one wanted to be the odd one out. Gloria stood alone in plain sight, exposed not because she was weak, but because the crowd needed someone to stand beneath them. Their eyes asked the same unspoken question: why hasn't she left yet? And the fact that she hadn't unsettled them more than her presence ever could. A ripple of laughter followed another exaggerated gesture from Obeji, and this time it felt rehearsed, almost forced. Gloria noticed it. The amusement was beginning to strain, stretching past comfort into something brittle. People laughed because they felt expected to, not because the moment was funny anymore. That shift mattered. It meant the crowd was performing too now, protecting their chosen side. She felt the ground changing under the party's polished surface, though no one else wanted to admit it yet. Near the edge of the lawn, a few guests exchanged glances, uncertainty creeping into their expressions. The longer Gloria remained standing, calm and composed, the harder it became to dismiss her as broken. Her silence disrupted the script. She wasn't begging. She wasn't reacting. And that refusal unsettled the balance. In a room built on spectacle, restraint became defiance. The crowd sensed it instinctively, though they couldn't name it. Something was off. Something wasn't following the expected rhythm of shame. Gloria felt the weight of her pregnancy grounding her, reminding her why she stayed. This wasn't about pride anymore, it was about endurance. Every second she remained became a quiet challenge to the crowd's judgment. She wasn't fighting back, yet she wasn't yielding either. That tension stretched thin, vibrating through the lawn, through the music, through the laughter that now sounded less certain. The party had chosen a side, yes. But it hadn't anticipated how uncomfortable that choice would soon become. As applause erupted again around Obeji, sharper but shorter this time, a distant vibration passed through the air, subtle yet undeniable. A few guests paused mid-laugh, brows knitting in confusion. Gloria noticed immediately. Her eyes lifted slightly, not to the crowd, but beyond it. The moment was changing. The same people who had chosen cruelty were about to be tested by silence. And not everyone would survive that test with their dignity intact. Gloria Ndukwi did nothing. She didn't shift her weight. She didn't lower her eyes. She simply stood there, breathing through the pressure as laughter thinned and curiosity took its place. To the crowd, her stillness read like surrender, the quiet of someone who had accepted her position. In Lagos, silence is often mistaken for weakness, especially when noise has already claimed the room. Guests leaned in, waiting for tears, for retreat, for proof that the humiliation had landed. What they didn't realize was that restraint takes more strength than reaction, and Gloria was holding it carefully. The lemon gown moved gently against her legs as a breeze crossed the lawn, lifting the fabric slightly, drawing attention back to her belly. A few whispers grew sharper, impatient. The crowd wanted closure, not composure. They wanted her to leave so the party could reset, so guilt wouldn't linger. Gloria felt her heart pounding now, steady but strong, each beat reminding her why she stayed. Her silence was not empty, it was deliberate, built from months of learning when to speak and when to endure. She had survived worse moments alone. This one had witnesses. Obeji Ikem noticed her lack of response and tilted his head slightly, amusement flickering into irritation. He expected tears. He expected collapse. Silence denied him satisfaction. His laughter slowed, then sharpened again, as if volume could force reaction. He misread the moment completely. Gloria's calm unsettled him more than anger ever could. He didn't yet understand that humiliation only works when the victim participates. And Gloria had stepped outside that exchange, leaving him performing alone. Around them, the crowd shifted uneasily. The longer Gloria stood without breaking, the harder it became to enjoy the spectacle. Some guests glanced at their phones, others pretended to focus elsewhere. The moment had stretched beyond comfort. Silence creates space, and in that space, people begin to question their role. The laughter that once bonded them now felt exposed. Gloria sensed the shift and remained still, allowing the discomfort to do its work. Her palm rested protectively over her belly again, a quiet declaration no one could misinterpret. Whatever shame they tried to project onto her, she refused to pass it down. This child would not inherit ridicule. That decision steadied her completely. She felt grounded, present, aware. The room mistook her composure for emptiness, never imagining how full she was, of resolve, of memory, of preparation. A low hum brushed the edges of the party again, almost masked by music, but present enough to cause heads to turn. Gloria noticed several guests pause, their brows creasing, their laughter trailing off mid-breath. The silence she held began to spread outward, infecting the space. Something was approaching. Something unscripted. The crowd didn't know it yet, but the moment they thought belonged to Obeji was slipping. As Gloria lifted her eyes slightly, not in defiance but in timing, she felt the night tightening toward a reveal. Her silence had bought her time. And time, she knew, was about to expose everything they assumed about her. The humiliation hadn't ended, it had paused. And whatever came next would determine who truly stood exposed under the lights. Memory returned like heat rising from asphalt, slow but unavoidable, pulling the night backward into a quieter time Gloria Ndukwi had survived in silence. She remembered Lagos mornings that began with unanswered calls, evenings that ended with empty rooms, and promises that dissolved the moment life demanded patience. Obeji Ikem had once spoken of forever with ease, as if love were permanent simply because he said it was. But when pressure arrived, when pregnancy, responsibility, and uncertainty showed up, his affection thinned. Standing at the party now, Gloria felt that past hovering close, not as pain, but as proof. He believed those memories belonged to her alone. He was wrong. She remembered the night he walked away, not dramatically, not angrily, but casually, like someone leaving a meeting early. His words had been careful, rehearsed, filled with excuses that sounded reasonable if you didn't listen too closely. He framed abandonment as necessity, distance as growth. Gloria had stood there then too, pregnant, quiet, absorbing the truth without spectacle. He believed silence meant acceptance. He believed she would fade from relevance. That belief followed him into every success afterward, comforting him. Tonight, he still stood on that assumption, unaware it was cracking beneath his feet. Obeji remembered that night differently. In his mind, he had escaped struggle, chosen ambition over burden, strength over sentiment. The story he told himself painted him as decisive, not cruel. Watching Gloria now, calm and composed, unsettled that version. He expected desperation. He expected bitterness. Instead, he saw restraint. The disconnect irritated him. It suggested something unfinished, something unresolved. And unresolved stories make people nervous, especially those who believe they already won. Around the party, the present blurred with the past as whispers about Gloria's return sparked fresh speculation. Some guests recalled the separation vaguely, half-remembered rumors shaped into judgment. No one knew the full story, only fragments filtered through status and convenience. Gloria understood this well. Lagos never waits for truth when assumption is faster. Yet the more the crowd whispered, the more Obeji felt a tightening in his chest, as if the past he dismissed was pressing closer than comfort allowed. Gloria shifted her stance slightly, the grass cool beneath her shoes, grounding her in the now. The past no longer controlled her, but it had prepared her. Every lonely night, every unanswered call, every sacrifice had sharpened her awareness. She had learned patience the hard way. She had learned timing. Obeji thought history ended when he left. He never considered that endings can also be beginnings, quietly building strength out of sight. The hum in the air returned, stronger now, vibrating faintly through glass and metal. A few guests looked up instinctively, distracted from gossip by something unfamiliar. Obeji noticed too, though he dismissed it quickly, refocusing on his audience. Gloria didn't look away. She understood this feeling, the moment just before truth surfaces. The past he buried wasn't gone. It was arriving. As lights shimmered across the lawn and conversation thinned again, Gloria felt certainty settle into her chest. This night was no accident. It was alignment. Obeji Ikem believed the story ended when he walked away, but stories have a way of circling back when lessons go unlearned. And whatever was approaching from the sky was about to prove that some pasts don't stay buried. They wait for the right moment to rise. The music faltered for half a second, not enough for most people to notice, but enough for the air to feel different. A low vibration slid beneath the rhythm, subtle yet persistent, like distant thunder with no clouds in sight. Glasses paused halfway to lips. A few heads tilted instinctively, brows knitting in confusion. Gloria and Ndukwi felt it immediately. The sound wasn't loud, but it was intentional, moving with purpose. It pressed against the night, demanding attention without asking permission. What moments ago felt controlled and cruel now felt unsettled, as if the party itself had begun to lose balance. Guests shifted their weight, scanning the sky above the canopies, laughter thinning into murmurs. Someone joked nervously, trying to reclaim control, but the sound returned again, stronger, closer. It vibrated through the lawn, through shoes, through chests. Even the lights seemed to hum faintly in response. Gloria remained still, eyes lifting slightly, not in surprise but recognition. This was no coincidence. Timing like this never was. The room didn't know it yet, but attention was already drifting away from mockery toward curiosity, and curiosity is the first crack in cruelty. Obeji Ikem frowned subtly, irritation flashing across his face as heads turned away from him. He adjusted his stance, forcing a laugh, but the sound no longer commanded the room. The vibration grew steadier now, impossible to ignore. Guests exchanged uncertain glances, unsure whether to keep performing amusement or acknowledge the interruption. Power hates distraction. Obeji felt it slipping, though he didn't understand why. He had planned the night to celebrate control, not lose it. And yet, something above them was quietly rewriting the focus of every eye. The breeze picked up, cooler now, fluttering tablecloths and lifting the edges of Gloria's gown. The scent of perfume and grilled food mixed with something sharper, metallic, unfamiliar. Conversations dissolved into fragments. A woman near the bar squinted upward, shielding her eyes from the lights. Phones rose again, this time not to record humiliation, but to capture the unknown. Gloria felt a strange calm settle over her shoulders. The room was no longer pressing inward. It was opening, stretching, waiting. A distant silhouette crossed the darkening sky, barely visible at first, a moving shape against the night. Gasps rippled unevenly through the crowd. Someone whispered, then fell silent. The sound intensified, rolling deeper, commanding space. Music cut abruptly now, leaving nothing to soften the moment. Without distraction, the truth of the interruption stood exposed. Whatever was approaching didn't belong to the party's script. It wasn't invited, and it wasn't small. Obeji's smile faded completely as he followed the direction of everyone's gaze. Confusion replaced confidence. He searched faces for reassurance and found none. The crowd no longer looked to him for cues. Their attention had lifted skyward, drawn by something that promised significance beyond social games. Gloria watched him carefully, noting the shift with quiet clarity. The balance had moved. The room no longer belonged to him. As the sound deepened into a commanding roar, Gloria inhaled slowly, feeling certainty settle into her bones. This was the moment she had endured for. The sky had changed the room, and with it, the rules. Whatever descended next would expose assumptions, rearrange power, and silence every laugh that came before. And as the crowd stood frozen beneath the lights, none of them realized just how close they were to witnessing a complete reversal. The roar grew unmistakable now, rolling over the mansion like a command, drowning out every lingering whisper. Heads tilted fully upward, necks craning, eyes wide with disbelief. A sleek white private jet emerged clearly beyond the compound, descending with controlled precision, lights blinking calmly as if unbothered by the chaos below. The lawn fell silent in waves, laughter evaporating mid-breath. Champagne glasses hovered forgotten in trembling hands. Gloria and Ndukwi felt the shift land heavily, not a shock, but confirmation. The moment the jet came into full view, the party stopped pretending. This was no background noise. This was an announcement no one could ignore. Phones rose higher now, no longer discreet, recording openly as the jet slowed and aligned itself nearby. Conversations died completely. Even the music equipment stood useless, abandoned by the DJ who stared upward like everyone else. The jet's presence rewrote the hierarchy instantly. In Lagos, private jets don't arrive quietly or without meaning. They signal power, urgency, and authority. Guests exchanged glances filled with calculation, each silently asking who among them could command such an arrival. No one spoke Gloria's name yet, but confusion was spreading fast. The party had lost control of its own narrative, and fear was quietly replacing amusement. Obeji Ikem stood stiff, his glass lowering slowly as realization crept across his face. His confidence drained in visible increments, replaced by unease he couldn't mask. He searched the crowd again, hoping for explanation, for reassurance, but found only mirrored confusion. The jet was not his. That truth struck him sharply. Whatever this was, it didn't revolve around him. For the first time that night, he felt small, reduced to a spectator in a moment he didn't own. Gloria watched him carefully, noting the crack in his posture. Power, she knew, often collapses the moment it's questioned. The jet's engines softened into a controlled hum as it completed its descent, lights illuminating the surrounding area with an authority no decoration could match. The lawn seemed suddenly smaller, the mansion less impressive under comparison. Guests stood frozen, unsure whether to clap, speak, or remain silent. No one moved toward Gloria yet. They were still recalculating, still afraid of choosing the wrong reaction. She remained exactly where she was, hands steady, breathing calm. The humiliation she endured minutes earlier felt distant now, almost unreal, like a storm that had passed without warning. A murmur finally broke through the silence, hesitant and fragmented. Speculation rushed in to fill the void. Names were whispered, titles guessed, assumptions thrown carelessly into the air. None of them landed. The truth hovered just out of reach, stretching the tension unbearably. Gloria felt the weight of anticipation pressing outward from her chest, not as anxiety, but inevitability. The jet had not arrived early. It had arrived on time. And timing, she knew, was everything. Obeji shifted again, straightening his jacket as if presentation might restore control. His eyes flicked briefly toward Gloria, then away, uncertainty flashing too quickly to hide. Something about her stillness unsettled him now. She hadn't reacted. She hadn't looked surprised. That detail lodged painfully in his awareness. The jet's presence raised a question he wasn't ready to answer. What if this moment wasn't about him at all? What if he had misread the entire night? As the engines finally powered down completely, the silence became absolute, heavy enough to press against the skin. Every face turned instinctively toward the compound gate, waiting for the next signal, the next reveal. Gloria exhaled slowly, her hand resting once more on her belly. The jet had frozen the party, but the truth it carried had yet to step into the light. And when it did, nothing, no laughter, no status, no pride, would survive unchanged. Movement finally broke the silence near the compound gate, subtle at first, then deliberate. Security personnel straightened instinctively, posture shifting from casual to formal. The crowd leaned forward as one, anticipation thickening the air. Gloria Ndukwi felt it before she saw it. The moment the night tipped from speculation into truth. This was no dramatic entrance, yet no announcement. Just controlled motion, purposeful and quiet. The kind that signaled authority without needing to speak. The party had waited for spectacle. Instead, it was being handed certainty. And certainty unsettles people far more than noise. A black luxury vehicle rolled in smoothly, stopping just short of the lawn. The doors opened with restraint, not urgency. A man stepped out holding a slim leather folder close to his chest, his expression neutral, his presence heavy with intent. Guests whispered again, faster now, sharper, trying to assign meaning. Gloria's gaze remained steady, her body unmoving. She recognized the weight of that folder instantly. It carried more than documents. It carried timing. It carried truth prepared long before night. This moment had been arranged quietly, patiently, far from public cruelty. The man paused, scanning the crowd briefly before his eyes landed on Gloria. Not with curiosity, with recognition. The shift was immediate, almost imperceptible, but undeniable. His steps redirected toward her, measured and confident. Conversation stopped again. Heads turned. Obeji Ikem noticed too late, his attention snapping sharply toward Gloria for the first time with uncertainty. Something inside him tightened. The room sensed it collectively. The center had moved. And it had moved toward the woman everyone dismissed. As the man approached, whispers morphed into confusion. Speculation crumbled under the weight of what was unfolding. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't charity. This was intention. Gloria's heartbeat remained calm, grounded by preparation. She had waited for this moment without rushing it, understanding that truth arrives best when it can no longer be denied. The man stopped at a respectful distance, his presence commanding without dominance. The leather folder remained closed, its contents withheld just long enough to stretch the tension to its breaking point. Obeji's confidence fractured visibly now, his posture stiffening as understanding struggled to form. He searched faces for explanation, for laughter, for dismissal. None came. The crowd no longer looked to him for cues. Their attention locked onto Gloria and the man before her, drawn by gravity they didn't control. Obeji felt something cold settle in his chest. The possibility he had never considered was unfolding in real time, and it terrified him. The man opened the folder slowly, deliberately, letting the soft sound of leather fill the silence. Documents caught the light briefly, crisp and official. Gloria felt the weight of years pressed gently into her chest, not as burden, but release. This was inheritance revealed not as spectacle, but as legacy. The name attached to it carried authority beyond wealth, a connection that redefined her entirely.
She was not standing there by chance.
She never had been. As the man inclined his head slightly toward Gloria, acknowledgement passing between them without words, the truth settled across the party, like a wave. The woman they mocked was no longer a question mark. She was an answer. And as understanding began to ripple outward, slow, unstoppable, the room realized too late that they had humiliated someone whose identity had been quietly rewriting their assumptions all along. The air shifted again, but this time it wasn't curiosity. It was panic dressed as politeness. Faces that once smiled too easily tightened, eyes darting between Gloria and Duqui and the leather folder now resting open in the man's hands. Laughter didn't just fade. It collapsed, retreating into throats that suddenly felt dry. The crowd sensed the reversal fully now. This wasn't a misunderstanding that could be laughed off. It was exposure, the kind that rearranges power in seconds. Gloria felt it spreading outward, the quiet realization that mockery had chosen the wrong target. Whispers returned, frantic and sharp, layered with regret. Names were reassigned meanings. Earlier jokes felt dangerous now, capable of turning back on their speakers. Guests straightened their clothes, adjusted smiles, rehearsed concern. Some glanced toward Gloria as if searching for mercy written on her face. Others avoided her gaze entirely, afraid eye contact might demand accountability. Fear had replaced humor seamlessly. In Lagos society, survival often depends on reading the room fast enough. Tonight, many were already too late. Obeji Ikem stood frozen at the center of the lawn, his earlier confidence stripped bare. The laughter that once empowered him now echoed painfully in memory. He replayed his gestures, his expressions, his performance, and felt heat crawl up his neck. The crowd he relied on had shifted allegiance, without apology. He was no longer leading the moment. He was trapped inside it. And worse, he could feel judgment turning slowly toward him, sharp and unforgiving. A few guests began moving subtly closer to Gloria, not boldly, not honestly, but cautiously. Compliments surfaced awkwardly, praise delivered too late to feel sincere. The same mouths that whispered cruelty now whispered admiration. Gloria noticed everything. The contrast was almost clinical. She didn't respond, didn't acknowledge the shift. Her silence forced them to sit inside their discomfort, to confront how quickly respect changes when power is revealed. The fear in their eyes said more than apologies ever could. Phones that once recorded humiliation now captured reverence. The camera angles changed. What had been framed as spectacle was now documented as significance. Gloria felt the irony settle quietly. Nothing about her had changed in the last few minutes. Not her character. Not her dignity. Only perception. And perception, she realized, was the most fragile currency in the room. Watching it collapse was almost surreal. Obeji shifted his weight, glancing toward Gloria again, but this time without mockery. His eyes held something else, calculation mixed with fear. He understood now that the story he told himself was incomplete. The past he dismissed had returned with receipts. And standing there, surrounded by people who no longer laughed with him, he felt a sharp edge of isolation for the first time. As the crowd continued recalibrating, fear tightening every movement, Gloria remained composed, anchored by certainty. The laughter was gone. In its place stood unease, regret, and the heavy awareness that actions had consequences. The party hadn't ended, but the roles had been reassigned. And the man who once laughed the loudest was now standing in a silence he could not escape. Obeji Ikem felt the weight of the night settle fully into his chest, heavy and suffocating as the truth arranged itself beyond denial. The lawn that once felt like his territory now felt exposed, unforgiving. Every face around him seemed sharper, more aware. He realized with painful clarity that the laughter he relied on had never been loyalty, only convenience. Standing there, stripped of momentum, he felt smaller than he ever had. For the first time, the story he told himself began to crack, and inside that crack lived regret he could no longer outrun. He looked at Gloria Ndukwi again, really looked this time, not as a symbol of his past but as a presence he had underestimated. Her calm unnerved him. There was no triumph in her expression, no desire to humiliate him back. That restraint cut deeper than anger ever could. He remembered how easily he walked away, how confidently he dismissed her strength. Those memories replayed now with new meaning, sharp and relentless. He saw it clearly. He hadn't escaped weakness. He had abandoned resilience. The crowd's silence amplified his thoughts, pressing in from all sides. No one rushed to defend him. No one laughed now. The same people who mirrored his arrogance earlier stood distant, unwilling to share his fall. He felt exposed, not because Gloria sought revenge, but because truth no longer needed volume. The realization burned quietly. Power borrowed from others disappears the moment they stop clapping. And his applause had ended. Obeji's mind raced toward apology, toward explanation, toward repair. Each option collapsed before it fully formed. Some moments don't invite correction. They record judgment. He understood then that timing matters more than intention. Regret, when late, becomes noise. The damage had already settled, layered into memory. He had mistaken patience for weakness, silence for emptiness. That misunderstanding now defined him. He took a half step forward, then stopped, unsure of his place. The distance between him and Gloria felt wider than the lawn itself. It carried years of dismissal, pride, and neglect. He sensed instinctively that no words would bridge it. Some losses announced themselves quietly, without ceremony. This was one of them. Gloria didn't move. She didn't need to. Her stillness held finality. Watching her, Obeji felt the sharp sting of consequence. Not imposed, but earned. He saw now that dignity outlasts dominance. And that realization hurt more than humiliation ever could. As the night continued around them, Obeji stood suspended in understanding that arrived too late to change anything. The victory he once celebrated revealed itself as a hollow illusion. And as silence wrapped around him, he understood that some lessons don't restore what's lost, they only explain why it can never return. The night didn't end with applause or chaos. It ended with something heavier, clarity. As the crowd slowly dispersed across the manicured lawns of Lekki, conversations resumed in quieter tones, stripped of arrogance. Gloria Ndukwi stood at the center of it all, not elevated on a stage, not surrounded by praise, but grounded in stillness. The power she now held wasn't loud or performative. It didn't demand attention. It simply existed. People glanced at her with caution now, measuring their words, aware that dignity had outlasted cruelty. The party lights still glowed, music eventually returned, but the energy had permanently changed. What began as humiliation ended as exposure, not just of Obeji Ikem, but of everyone who chose laughter over humanity. In that silence, the truth became undeniable. Power gained through pride is fragile, but power rooted in restraint is unshakable. Gloria felt the night air cool against her skin as she slowly turned away from the center of the lawn. Her pregnancy, once treated like a liability, now felt like an anchor, proof of continuity, of future, of life moving forward despite attempts to diminish it. She hadn't come to prove anything. She hadn't come to reclaim status or demand apology. She had come because silence no longer needed protection. Every step she took away from the crowd felt lighter, not because the past had disappeared, but because it no longer defined her direction. In choosing not to retaliate, she denied humiliation its final victory. The absence of revenge confused many watching her leave, but Gloria understood something they didn't. Justice doesn't always require confrontation. Sometimes it only requires presence. Behind her, Obeji Ikem remained rooted in place, surrounded by people yet entirely alone. The party continued without him, laughter now cautious, fragmented. He felt the weight of memory pressing inward, replaying moments he once celebrated. He finally understood that pride had cost him more than a marriage. It had cost him perspective. Watching Gloria walk away, unbothered, unbroken, he realized that regret doesn't always arrive as pain. Sometimes it arrives as clarity. And clarity, when late, can be devastating. There would be no grand reconciliation, no dramatic closure. Just the quiet understanding that some doors close not out of cruelty, but consequence. For the guests, the night would become a story retold with edits. Some would soften their roles. Others would exaggerate their silence. But deep down, they would remember how quickly they aligned with mockery and how fast they shifted when power revealed itself. That memory would linger, uncomfortable and instructive. Lagos society thrived on appearances, but tonight had cracked the illusion. Wealth wasn't what silenced the room. Dignity was. Gloria hadn't raised her voice once, yet she had rewritten the narrative entirely. That lesson would echo long after the lights dimmed. As Gloria reached the gate, she paused briefly, not to look back, but to breathe. The night felt different now, less heavy, more open. She placed a hand on her belly again, grounding herself in what mattered most. This child would grow knowing strength that didn't need permission, knowing that worth isn't granted by crowds or stripped by laughter. Gloria had carried shame that wasn't hers long enough. Tonight, she set it down. The private jet stood quiet in the distance, no longer a spectacle but a symbol of preparation, of patience, of truth arriving on its own terms. Gloria didn't rush toward it. She didn't need to. Her journey wasn't about escape. It was about alignment. Everything had arrived when it was meant to. The humiliation, the silence, the reversal. Timing had done its work. And as the gates closed behind her, the final lesson settled gently but firmly over the night. Power is not humiliation, pride is not strength, and silence is not weakness when it protects dignity. Some people lose everything not because they were poor, but because they misjudged what truly mattered. Gloria walked forward, not victorious, but whole. And that, more than wealth or revenge, was the outcome no one saw coming. If you were the one that was humiliated in this video, and God being so kind later saved you from the hands of your enemies, what will be your reaction towards your oppressors? Comment and subscribe on this channel. Let us know your mind.